Hello mate, how you doing? In today's video I'm talking about this phenomenon of feeling like a boy trapped in a man's body. And to ask you the question directly, man, when you really sit with it for a moment in your life, the way your life is right now, the way you feel psychologically, the habits, the behaviors, the things that you do, your sense of direction and whatnot, do you feel more like a boy or more like a man? And I promise you, regardless of the answer, man, I'm not judging you no matter what, okay? Because this is a very, very common problem. So common, in fact, that I've spoken about it tons of times on this channel already. And today, I'm talking about it again because it's so important. Today, I'm talking about Peter Pan syndrome. This feeling of being a man-child. This feeling, if someone's called you a man-child before, maybe you say that to yourself. This feeling of being psychologically a boy. I'm talking about why this happens, and I'm talking about what you can do about it, all right? So firstly, I want to just sort of outline, why am I talking about this and why should you even listen to me? I used to be this. I'm 31 now, but I was in my mid-20s and I still wasn't growing up. In my mid-20s, I was still emotionally, psychologically, and even financially, I was still about 15, 16 years old. I was going through this state of stunted development. I was living with my dad. My dad was paying all my bills for me, all my rent. I still had to borrow money from my dad for things like going out with friends. I didn't have any sense of purpose or direction or motivation or drive to do anything in life. The idea, like if someone asked me the question, what do you want to do with the rest of your life kind of thing, just freaked me out so hard that I didn't even answer the question. I just was like, nope, don't want to answer it. I played shitloads of video games. I was going to raves and parties and hedonistic stuff, pleasure seeking. It was all just a shambles. The kind of stuff you'd expect from someone much younger than me. I was in my mid-20s and it was getting on to be my late 20s. And I also had this problem where what I would do is I would leave home, I'd leave my father, because I had this feeling that I was destined for greater. This was like something deep within me, some whisper from within that was saying, you need to go, you need to differentiate, you need to become a man. So I tried that. I tried leaving my dad's place plenty of times. I moved out, moved to a different county, and then came back. And then I got a job in London, went there for a bit, and then came back. And then I went to Australia to travel. I said, see you later, everybody. I'm going to go travel now. I'm going to find myself. And then guess what happened? Because I was in Australia, I was on my own, and that voice within and my fears that came back from the depths forced me back. Next thing you know, I'm back once again, living with my father. No matter how many times I tried to remove myself and forge an identity outside of my family, I kept going back. Until one time, I started watching some self-development content on YouTube. And this was around the time where Jordan Peterson started to become quite popular. Now, regardless of your thoughts about him now, he's kind of gone off the deep end a little bit. But back in the day, when he first appeared, he was releasing full lectures that were really useful. And in one lecture in particular, I'll never forget it, he's talking about men who never grow up. And he's talking about the Peter Pan myth. And with every word that Jordan Peterson spoke on this video, I was like, this guy is describing me. He is describing me. He's describing everything about me. I am Peter Pan in this situation. I'm floaty, I'm flighty, I'm inconsistent, I'm unreliable. I don't even trust myself because I say I'm going to do one thing and then I do something else. I make a decision to do something, my intellect gets behind that decision, I go in that direction, and then next thing you know, I change path and then come up with another reason why that wasn't the right path and that one was the right path. I change it all the time. And at the time I was like, wow. I even was dating a Wendy. A Wendy to a Peter Pan is an enabler, right? Someone who doesn't challenge Peter Pan to grow up. Someone who says, okay, don't worry, you just be Peter Pan, I'll take care of you like your mum. So in that moment, I realised, I was like, shit, this is me, I've got to change. And over the course of years, I also discovered something else. Because I'm a men's coach, I've been a men's coach for a few years now, and I've worked with many men. And one thing I realised from doing all this work is that I'm not alone, right? I'm not alone. There are countless men in their 30s, 40s, or even 50s who are maybe successful in their career, wearing a suit at work, but they actually feel like they're just wearing their dad's clothes. Or men who are in a marriage that's more like a mother-child dynamic. Instead of a man-woman dynamic, husband-wife dynamic, is just a boy being told what to do, really resentful, angry that she's not either having sex with him or whatever, and he's like, she's not doing this for me. And she's frustrated because she has to keep telling him to do stuff and he's not doing it himself. I get men who are in their 30s and 40s and they're still in their fucking bedroom, in their parents' house, playing shitloads of video games all day and watching shitloads of anime with posters on the walls. And it's like, this is not the life of an adult man. This is not the life of an adult man. This is the life of a teenager. Now, but what are the causes though? Because is it your fault? Absolutely not. I should have said that earlier in the video. It's not your fault, mate. All right? It's not your fault. It is your responsibility to do something about it now. And I'll get to that later in the video. But it's not your fault. These things were created way beyond you. But there's one reason today I want to talk about specifically. Overprotective parenting. One of the best books I've ever read. I highly recommend you read it as well, mate, if you're interested in healing and deep personal growth. It's a book called Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents by Lindsay Gibson. It's quite a mouthful. But the point is, in the book, it's not the central theme of the book, but in the book she talks about how parents who are emotionally immature, they're still stuck in adolescence themselves, right? They were just the children who had children at some point. They can often revert to a parenting style of overprotectiveness as a way of managing their own anxiety because they can't actually deal with their own emotions, so they become control freaks or overprotective with their children. Now, this is often done with the best intentions, but the road to hell is paved with those things, right? Paved with good intentions. So often this has a stunting, crippling development on a boy's psyche. But I'm going to break it down for you, man. I'm going to tell you about the three sort of biggest impacts that emotionally immature, overprotective parents have on a boy and how this naturally just creates Peter Pan syndrome and man-child tendencies. This stuff creates it. So impact number one. In order to become a man, to grow from being a boy to a man, you have to face adversity, struggle, and challenge. But the thing is, overprotective parents make it their job to completely remove all types of adversity and struggle and challenge from a boy's life. Well, what this does, the impact this has, is a boy never has to develop his own sense of independence. He never has to actually realise the strength that lies within him because he's never actually been challenged to do that. A lot of these men in my private work, they admit to me that they don't actually trust themselves at all. And if we look into their past history and their conditioning, they were never challenged to trust themselves. Their parents did everything for them. Their parents removed any aspect of decision making from the boy's life. The parents removed responsibility or taking responsibility for the boy's life. They completely just took away that option in his life. So when I, as a coach, start challenging the man to take responsibility and I call him out on his bullshit when he starts playing the victim and whatnot, he freaks out oftentimes because he's not used to it. His dad never did it. His mum never did it. No one's ever done it. But the result of this is he becomes an adult who avoids responsibility like the plague. He often plays the victim and he basically has no self-trust and is always kind of dependent on other people to meet his needs for him. Impact number two. Something to remember, man. Failure is a part of life. You cannot succeed at something without failing. But the thing is, what overprotective parents do is they remove, by taking the child out of, removing responsibility, decision-making, all that stuff from the boy's life, they remove failure. They remove discomfort. They remove risks. But what kind of message does that send to the boy? The boy gets the message that failure is something to be avoided at all costs. Failure is unfamiliar. My parents don't like failure very much, so it must be terrible. And risks are to be avoided at all costs. And perhaps more toxically, the boy is also realising that, holy shit, if these things were to happen, I don't know how I'm going to handle it. Well, this completely undermines the boy's self-trust. Why would he have trust in himself? Men who were raised like this, they often reject or push away opportunities, even ones that could lead to growth, because they're afraid of what might happen. They're afraid of failure, basically. They are completely risk averse. Like even if they have a genuinely good thing that they could do that involves a bit of risk, controlled risk, they avoid it completely. These men often self-sabotage. They might go in one direction for a little while and then they'll just end up doing things that are against their self-interest. They'll completely sabotage their own progress. They end up choosing safe but stagnant lives. all because they're afraid. Okay, so impact number 3. Adult relationships require emotional maturity, emotional intelligence. They require you to navigate the often complex and chaotic world of emotionality and communicate effectively. It's a skill that you need to build if you are going to have deep, fulfilling connections well into adulthood. But here's the thing. When parents are overprotective, a kid does not learn how to deal with their own emotional worlds. They don't develop the skills necessary through challenge and adversity to be in touch with their emotions, to communicate them effectively, to handle conflict. Again, these overprotective parents are shielding the kid from any kind of conflict. This stunts a kid's emotional growth. This might make, as a man, this might mean that he is now emotionally immature, which means that as a man, with this kind of pattern, men like this, they often seek surface level connections that avoid vulnerability. It often makes these men, by nature, inauthentic, because they're trying to avoid strong emotions in relationships. So they're going to put on a brave face. They're going to play the nice guy. They're going to play the people pleaser. They're going to play the social chameleon. It's all an effort to avoid emotional vulnerability. The problem with this is it often pushes people away. These men are often super avoidant. It might be the case that the other people don't feel like they ever even know the guy. So over the course of time, this leads to chronic loneliness because the man never feels seen, never feels understood, never has direct contact or intimacy with the people in his life. And it might be the case that over a long enough time frame, he ends up being one of these 41, 42-year-old men who have no friends, no wife, and no family around. It happens all the time. So I hope that wasn't too intense, because now, mate, I'm going to talk about 3 ways that you can essentially overcome the effects of overprotective parenting, and by doing that, you can overcome Peter Pan syndrome. So the first tip I've got for you, mate, is what you essentially need to do is you need to look at all the ways in life that you avoid responsibility, you avoid taking ownership, and you avoid making decisions. Because again, if you learn this stuff from parents, you need to reverse it. So you can actually just make a list of these things. It's going to be difficult, right? It's going to be challenging. It's not going to be easy, but you actually absolutely need to do this. Once you've made a list of all these things, then that gives you the roadmap of things that you need to do. For example, if you find that you habitually avoid difficult conversations, well, then that gives you a roadmap. That gives you something that you can do differently. Tip number 2 relates to failure. Now, you need to understand, mate, that if you're avoiding failure, if you're avoiding doing things because you're afraid of failure, then, mate, you're failing already. The thing is about a Peter Pan, Manchild kind of type, is he will intentionally keep himself really vague and foggy when it comes to his goals. He'll often avoid making goals or even clarifying a vision for himself. And the thinking behind this is, if I don't clarify my goals in the future or anything that I want, then I won't know when I've failed. But the problem with this is that you're failing constantly. You're failing constantly until you hit 30 or 40 or 50, and then you kind of look back and you're like, holy shit, I've done absolutely nothing with my life. Well, then by that point, you've wasted a bunch of time. So what I often say to clients is you need to find your mountain to climb. We all have one. We all have a mountain. Pick your mountain and walk towards it slowly. You need to understand that failure, you need to teach your inner child, as the adult, you need to teach your inner child that failure is healthy. Failure is a sign of progress. Failure is a sign that you're heading in the right direction. Everything that you ever want and all that you could be is on the other side of failing. Okay, so tip number 3, if you find that you lack emotional maturity and social maturity, social intelligence, well then what you need to do is essentially build these skills. The only problem with that is if you go out into the wild and try and build these skills, then what can happen is you can get into some tricky situations, some painful situations, and you could even potentially re-traumatize yourself. I've got plenty of guys who are traumatized, really, from childhood, and they're going out and they're approaching from day one beautiful women and asking for their number and getting horribly rejected for it. Well then, I don't recommend this, because what you want to do is build some social skills. So what I recommend you do is what I did, essentially, is join a goddamn men's group. Join a regular men's group. It's a safe, vulnerable, supportive and encouraging space where you can practice emotional intelligence, communicating your emotions, and you can practice being around other men and getting a sense for what that connection, an authentic connection, really feels like. And that's difficult to find in life. That's difficult to go out there and find that, which is exactly why in 2 weeks, as of this recording, I'll be releasing my community online. And in that community, there'll be opportunities for 3 sharing circles a week, led by yours truly. So click the link in the pinned comment down below and in the description to get on the waiting list for that, and I will see you in the community. All right, mate, take care, stay courageous.